This is Beyond Belief Sobriety, a podcast and community for people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. And if you're new to this YouTube channel, if you just stumbled upon us, this is a podcast. We post episodes every Wednesday in an audio format. We also have a live stream we do every Saturday, and we have a little community surrounding this. To my right or left here, I'm not sure which, is John Huey. He has been a frequent guest. I think probably, I don't even know, maybe 10 or more episodes. But he's been doing a series about atheism and sobriety, and has written some really thoughtful articles and about the topic. And we're going to go further into that today. So, John, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay, but like, Keith Richards once said, when asked if he was happy to be seen, he said, "I'm happy to be seen anywhere," because I had I had a bit of a health crisis in May and June, and ended up with some serious problems that put me in the ICU. And we don't talk about personal stuff on here. We're not here for confession time or anything like that. But just suffice it to say, when I came out of the ICU, I was having some hallucinations because of the drugs they give you, but none of them had to do with having a spiritual experience, having met God, or in other ways, any kind of way being converted. So I
Thank goodness for that.
exactly. I want to assure all our devoted fans that even though my blood oxygen level went down to almost nothing, and my blood pressure was the same, that when they brought me back and I came out, I was still the hardcore atheist I was before I had the near-death experience. So in case
Good. That would have been disastrous if you would have found God.
Well, then I would have known. I did see some space aliens, okay? And I told my wife there was a CIA conspiracy at one point when I was just coming out from the 5 days of ICU, and a lot of other things I won't go into. It was a terrible experience. I don't wish it on anyone, but it does get you focused on what's important in your life.
Sure.
And, from a personal standpoint, it got me even more focused and more grateful than I was before about my wonderful daughters and my incredible wife, who went through worse things than I did, because she had to sit there and, she refused to go home. They tried to pry her out of that place and send her home, and she refused. She stood there and watched me, or sat there and watched me. And my daughters were there. One of my daughters, in 5 days, she flew round trip from Chicago twice because of the condition that I was in. They told her to go home. At one point, she turned around and flew right back. Those are people that care about you, and that makes you very, very grateful about that. All right. Yeah. But, I'm also glad and grateful to be able to have come out of it with my brain somewhat intact, even, despite the low blood oxygen and whatnot. I believe that, I've had the neurologist give me some cognitive tests, and, there are a few little things going on, but I think the brain is working okay. So we're going to find out here as we dive in to yet another incredibly dense topic in this third of 5, and who knows, John, maybe 6. I'm thinking about number 6 sort of in the back of my mind, but I certainly have the 5 sort of sketched out. But the number 3 is regarding abstinence. Now, I've written about abstinence before. One of my articles that I wrote some years ago, a few years back, and that you reprinted when you were running the website, and is now archived on, I believe, the Secular AA website. And you may want to link that along with my article that's going to post with this. I went into like the personal aspects of my journey toward and to abstinence, regarding the people I knew and the people I learned from, and how I got focused on that. This is a little different because I've come to see abstinence as an absolute value, all right? And it's a much deeper topic than it appears to be on the surface. And it has universal applicability to, I believe, personally, it's just an opinion, as all my stuff is, to everyone who is in any way involved in this whole business of getting and staying sober. It's beyond critical. And as such, I believe that the atheist position for people who are not believers, we'll go in a little bit further into the talk. We'll talk about briefly about folks who are believers. But for those of us who are unbelievers, I think abstinence is even more critical than I originally thought. And it takes on a whole different patina, as it were, as we take a closer look at it.
So are you thinking about it more as something more than just the absence of drinking alcohol?
Exactly. It's a fundamental value that we arrive at least some of us, okay, can or do arrive at through our atheism. And our atheism not only reinforces it, it strengthens it over the long term. It just doesn't reinforce that initial decision that everyone has to make. It reinforces it over the long term. And like so many other things in the recovery community, it involves a degree of paradox. When I started thinking about this, I started thinking about abstinence as something that's partially arrived at through a acknowledgement of our limitations, of our, as we go into what is happening around us, as we have made our decision to quit drinking or using and we start to progress, we take a look at ourselves and we take a look at the world around us, and we see that we're, not only human, but we're sort of, in many ways, we're drastically limited, in terms of the influence we have over events, or the influence we have over the course of history, or the influence, in fact, we have over others. I mean, that's extremely limited. We do have a lot of influence over what happens to us, but that's in the micro sense. In the macro sense, we have to acknowledge that we have not only limits, but fairly inherent and severe limitations.
Would that be applicable to just limitations on the ability to drink normally?
That's it. And it can broaden onto other things. Obviously, as far as abstinence goes, one of the first hurdles that anyone has to get over is this ridiculous assumption that an addict or an alcoholic can use or drink normally.
Right.
That's been disproven over and over and over again. I know maybe some of your other guests and some of the other people that appear on the podcast these days would disagree with that. But, my nearly 36 years of experience with sobriety leads me to believe that there is no variance from that, at least in the experience that I have. But this basic fundamental tenet that we call abstinence, it is unconditional. And atheism, as we look around the world as an atheist in a realistic way, we actually end up defining this term unconditionality. It's a sort of a fundamental requirement for us to move forward.
Right.
Because how are we going to move forward in long-term sobriety, days, weeks, months, years, decades, unless we look at this as an unconditional, absolute value?
So how is that different from how someone who believes in God would see it? Wouldn't they also see abstinence in that way?
We'll go into that in a bit. I mean, as far as the net effect, there's no difference in it whatsoever.
Okay.
Right? As far as, the net effect of somebody that really believes that stuff and stays sober. I have no, that's, just a, complete and utter fantasy world. But if it gets you there, that's what gets you there. This podcast, this talk isn't for them. I would urge, most believers to turn it off right now. If
Right.
they, I know you don't like to hear that, but that's I'm not talking to you if you're a believer.
Right.
Your beliefs are irrelevant to me and have been since, as I've said many times, I was a very young kid.
Okay.
So, what I'm talking about is people of unbelief. And, I use the word
I understand.
atheist, other people, and, there we go.
So I understand. Yeah. Let's just focus on those who are atheists and are looking at maybe struggling with alcohol and looking at
Right,
getting sober.
right, right.
And this is a good way for them to think about their sobriety rather than thinking
Right.
in the terms of being powerless and needing
No,
this and
no,
that.
all of
Right.
that stuff, that horseshit. Excuse me.
Right.
Oh, that's the first
But it's just a
blooper.
matter of understanding your limitations and then understanding that abstinence is unconditional. It's a
Here's the thing.
must for your personal growth.
This is about what we do know. All right. This is not about what we don't know. This is not about speculation. This is not about cosmology. This is not about the great world at large. This is what we do know about our drinking and or drug use. And what we do know, the observable limitations that we see in our lives or have seen in our lives when we went through that course. In my case, 23 years from the age of 15 to the age of 38, which still astonishes me. I'm, going to be 74 in December, and I've, been sober now for considerably longer than I drank. But the fact that I lasted the way I did it, the fact that I lasted through those 23 years is still pretty astonishing to me. My observable limit, my personal observable limitations when it comes to, in my case, alcoholism, which I call it. I know they
Mm-hmm.
call it all kinds of things now. I'm not very trendy. I guess I'll never call it alcohol use disorder.
Mm-hmm.
But in any event, what I came to the conclusion to on January 3rd, 1987, is I hit the wall in terms of my limitations. And as an atheist, that's what we have to latch on to. We don't have this exterior veneer, this, in my opinion, all of this, these other trappings, all of these lists, all of these sayings, all of these cute expressions on a clubhouse wall. What I have and what I had was an acknowledgement of those observable limitations and the inextricable connection between my observable limitations and the word abstinence. And that's what we're talking about today. All right. Atheists think clearly. Right. Many do. Many think, when I look at the conversations that I have on the internet or on Facebook or whatever with people that I consider to be friends, or certain groups I go to that are, that are not very integrated. They're almost universally, predominantly atheists. I'm often struck by the clarity of these folks' thoughts. They don't have any confusion about the dark metaphysical facts of existence, right? Or very little confusion. They tend to be extremely realistic in their approach to life. And it's an approach that I would suggest for anyone who is caught in the midst of complications as it revolves around your initial and continued sobriety.
Yes, I think that's probably the most critical component of what you've written here is if you're an atheist or really just someone for whom religion is not even an issue or whatever, and you go to a recovery meeting where they stress spirituality, it complicates things. Spiritual terms, you have to try to figure out what the hell are they talking about. And if you just speak clearly as an atheist, we're talking about facts and
Uh,
actual
the,
events.
there's no other way. That's the
Right,
only way it can present itself to a person of true non-belief.
right.
Now we get to this issue about, you know, religious. Okay, religion motivates people. Religion is a indisputable fact in many believers' lives. They find it not only comforting but essential. And well, I don't want to say I don't give a I don't care. Right? I don't care. Uh, they're sober. They're doing it that way. Many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, many millions of people have done it that way. But people like me have dropped dead in the droves in trying to deal with that. And that's the folks I'm trying to reach. I didn't let it kill me because as I've said many times, I was very fortunate. I had my atheist group here very early on in my sobriety. I live in a big East Coast city, and Washington D.C. isn't exactly a capital of faith,
Hmm.
unless you happen to be a Roman Catholic like Kavanaugh or somebody, or Alito or one of them. We won't go down that road, but unless you're one of them, it's not a very religious place. So I actually had a lot of advantages with this when I started up early on. And I'm not minimizing the struggles that folks have out in God's country in the midst of this mass psychosis, which is how I would probably define it, that revolves around contemporary religion and a lot of the negative issues that we see every day regarding that. But needless to say, they're sober, they're doing it that way. And if it's getting and keeping them sober, let's just sort of leave them behind. We need to leave them to work out their own lives, their own historical imperative, and they need to be in their program, not mine. All right. I don't need to be in that program. I was in that program for a long, long time, and I no longer need to be in that program, and I am not in that program, even though I go places where some atheists and agnostics continue to use those initials, and people sort of yell at me about that from time to time. Why do you go there? They call it, no, I go there because, the net effect is the effect that I'm seeking, which is a place without any of that stuff. All right. So we're not going to talk about them anymore. They've got their thing. We've got ours. Now, we're not going to talk about them per se, but we are going to talk a little bit about the problems that we have with them when we confront people that conflate their belief with our unbelief.
Mm-hmm.
They somehow think that deep down we're going to find God. Right? When I started this podcast, I'm sort of joking about coming out of the hallucinations of the ICU. Just about everybody that goes. I was under for 5 days, and I came out with a full blown ICU psychosis. That was psychosis. I knew it was psychosis when the drugs and the other issues that were going on with me cleared up. My brain cleared up, and once my brain cleared up and I wasn't seeing things anymore, which was totally medically induced, I came back to the real world. That's the world I live in. And there's no way, even in that extreme circumstance, they could have come and prayed over me or done whatever the hell they do to people in those situations. That wouldn't have made a bit of difference to me because I'm an atheist and I'm going to die an atheist. And that's the way it's going to be. And to be subjected to people that are trying to reform and change that is one of the biggest problems that many people in sobriety face. And as I've urged in other forums, you don't need to put up with that. You do not need to engage with that. You do not need to talk to them about that. You have no obligation whatsoever to them in any way. You have an obligation to yourself, your sobriety, and your family if you have one.
I feel sometimes that the people that are dogmatically religious, where they believe that things just have to be done their way, they're so frustrating to me because I don't see that coming from me or from you or from any atheist. I'm not trying to get anyone to do things my way. I'm okay with somebody that wants to do something however they want to do it. But I occasionally get emails, and I got an email from someone not that long ago who told me how disappointed they were with this podcast because I had made some kind of a snide comment about AA or somebody being religious or spiritual or whatever. And it was like, do they have any idea how much crap we've been given by people who tell us that we're wrong or that we need to do something different? Do they, I felt like writing a long letter to him about the harassment that I went through in an AA meeting. But anyway, enough of that.
Well, you
But
don't
you get
have
that
to
from
do,
one
well,
side. It does
and
happen.
you get it all kinds of ways. All right. And they're diverting me from my primary purpose if I
Yeah, that is
allow the
true.
passive aggressive suggestion
It is true. I mean,
that
it is true.
and
It's a waste of time.
it's overtly aggressive sometimes. I've heard people
Oh, yeah.
describe but it's much more commonly passively
It
aggressive,
is. It is. You're right about
where
that.
they are pushing this book, this steps, and all this other stuff, which
Yep.
is even widely distributed in the secular community.
Yeah, interpreted in different ways.
And
Yes.
I'm not interpreting it at all. I categorically reject it. And that's a whole different podcast going back to my 2018 talk at our last in-person international convention.
Yeah.
That was what that was
Well,
about.
sorry
This
for getting
isn't
all heated
about
there. I
that.
just,
But yeah, we can't fail to mention that we cannot be diverted from our bedrock conviction about the necessity of our own abstinence by other people's opinions of our essence, ourselves, our methods, or anything about us.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
can't
We
allow
have to stay
them.
focused on our path and not be diverted and not
Absolutely.
be,
Absolutely.
yeah, because it's a total waste of time. It's a total waste of time.
Well,
And it would have been a waste of my time to write that guy an email.
yeah, I mean, it just engaging with such people. There was one on the Facebook, on that Beyond Belief Facebook group, which has, the crazies invade regularly there. And there was one guy that stirred up an enormous hoo-ha about something, and then he got frustrated because he couldn't convert people, and he got up and left, and people were writing all of these long screeds to him about him leaving and stuff. And I just said goodbye and good luck. That was
Yeah.
my comment.
And you're talking about
Goodbye and good luck.
the old AA Beyond Belief Facebook group, of which I have nothing to
Right.
do
It
with. And
has
this
nothing to
podcast
do
is,
with this
yeah,
podcast.
yeah, absolutely not.
You
At
left
one
that
time,
behind.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's God knows who knows what's going on with that now. I don't
Oh,
care.
it's
You do
got,
know, but I
yeah,
don't
it's got
participate.
high entertainment value for me. And
Okay,
plus, there's so much misinformation there and so much misdirection there
that's too
that I
bad.
feel compelled to chime in with my hardcore atheism from time to time because
Yeah,
and there's many people there that wish I would go away. And if I had died in the ICU, I'm sure there wouldn't have been, there might have been some non-alcoholic sparkling wine
yeah.
cork popping in various places like Canada and England and a couple of other spots. But in Southern California and other, seats of enlightenment and secular recovery. But, be that as it may, what I've got to focus on is not them. I've got to focus on this central core value. Now, atheists do not have a monopoly on the word abstinence. The word abstinence can be arrived at and used in a variety of ways. I do not define the word abstinence for the world. I define it for myself and for the observable effect that the utilization of that word and the concept that is associated with it on my fellow alcoholics over decades of close observation. All right. Now, there is a absolute value. There's a purity, and I'm getting around to the title of this thing. All right. There's an absolute purity in approaching the word abstinence without any spiritual context whatsoever. When you do that, you begin to boil the word down to its absolute essence. And its absolute essence is, I hate to use cliches, but I'll use one. It's a simple answer to a complicated problem. That's what a real atheist, or an atheist who's committed, right, like I am, is providing to anybody I might talk to. If I'm providing anything, I'm providing a simple answer to a complicated problem. I've dealt with a couple of very difficult cases in recent memory and in recent years, and I've dealt with some very difficult cases in the past. Universally, what they failed to do, in my opinion, is grasp the simplicity of the argument, which is that abstinence is the only thing that works 100% of the time. If you can't get that, all right, if you can't somehow understand that, then you start dickering with it. You start making your sobriety provisional. You start thinking about the maybes and the wherefores and the what-fors and the I was wronged by my mommy, or my daddy was so mad at me, or the bad.
So, John, what about a situation where somebody does realize that abstinence is the answer, that they want to be abstinent
Right.
but they can't? They keep drinking anyway.
Well, there are mysteries in this.
I mean, you know people like that. You've met people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. But they say they understand, but do they really? That's always they say they're getting it, but do they really? All right. I've seen the most incredible behaviors behind this failure to grasp that word. And some of it is in the realm of psychiatric practice. And I am not a practitioner. I don't have the letters MD or PhD, behind my name. I'm just a, bachelor's degree and went to graduate school at Georgetown for a while before I quit, who, learned a little bit about the practical realities of this along the way. I'm not one of your authors that comes on with a long resume that can be pointed to behind this in the scientific realm. But my practical knowledge of this is extremely deep, all right? And I become a reductionist. That's a term that's used negatively in many contexts. But in this context, reducing the essence of what we're trying to do to this is, not in any way negative. There's nothing negative that can happen to you if you reduce your ideas about sobriety to that word. What bad could possibly happen to you if you totally reduced it to that, no matter what's going on with you?
That's how I've always viewed it. So, and I think we've talked about this before. So, I have always viewed sobriety, the word sobriety or being sober, as being abstinent of not drinking alcohol. That's what it means to me. Period. But other people have put other meanings on it that you can be, we've talked about this before too, a dry drunk and all this crap. That there's that
Well,
that sobriety is more than just the absence of drinking.
they're going back to their moral authority.
Right.
All of a sudden, when they get sober, they have some moral authority that allows them to make pejorative comments about you that are unrelated to your drinking.
But would you say that my way of thinking about sober means abstinent from alcohol, is that a reductionist view then? Would I?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely,
that's how
because
I
you
see
are
it.
sober.
I've always seen it
If
that
you're
way.
abstinent,
You're sober, period. I could be a total asshole. I can be a jerk, but I'm not drinking. I'm abstinent.
I mean, you could be a lot of things. All right. What you are is different from that.
Right.
Now, I have observed that people's, as I've said here, I'm sure many times, people's behavior drastically improves.
True.
Once they remove the substance from their system.
I agree.
But we don't have anything like there's no such, again, this is redundant for me. There's no such thing as a personality change.
No.
You're still the same person, but your behavior changes.
Your behavior changes. And it's almost a natural thing when you stop drinking, isn't it? Honestly, I think in a way it is.
There's a neurological, I believe in a physiological, I felt a lightening of I had never been, I'm not a depressive, right? I don't suffer from depression, but I was so depressed when I came to the end of my drinking. I wanted to end my life, which is something I never want to do. All right. And when I sobered up, all of that sort of stuff went away. Now, that was just my story. And in a lot of cases, I just reduce it to the old thing of, what came first, the alcohol or the depression? If the depression came before the alcohol, that's something that you have to treat some other way. But just my opinion is, if your depression was as a result of your alcoholism and drug use, it's likely to go away or drastically improve once you quit.
And a lot of time it does. I've had doctors tell me that they can't even treat somebody until they stop drinking.
They won't. But the thing about sobriety is that really infuriates me, as when people make these twists and turns and put up these hoops and barriers that people have to encounter or to jump through to maintain their abstinence and their sobriety. They make it conditional. For me, it's unconditional. Either you are or you aren't. If you're abstinent, you're sober.
I agree.
And that's it. All right. That's the way it works. Without any of this moral authority. Now, the purity of, I'm just going to read. I have my little crib sheet here today, and I've got a little thing here. I'm going to read. The purity of atheist thought is applied to the psychic and physical disturbances caused by alcoholic behavior patterns, disrupts through a commitment to abstinence those inherently negative actions. There is a purity in this reductive suggestion that I am making about the word abstinence. If you purely commit to that, your alcoholic behavior, as we were just discussing, is likely to be disrupted. And by making that commitment, those inherently negative actions. And your actions, when they become inherently negative, push you in even more negative directions, particularly when you're drinking and using. And it spirals down. And if you focus on those inherently negative reactions and behaviors, you're going to possibly be in trouble. I think that this commitment to abstinence flushes a lot of that stuff out of your system. That's probably going to be controversial. I mean, it's not a drug, it's not a therapy, it's not a dictum, but it's like it purifies a lot of the negativity that has taken over the alcoholic and addictive personality. The personality's there, the behavior changes,
Correct.
and the negative consequences seep away. And there's something very pure about that. And that happens because of this thing you did. Now, somebody could go back listening to this and saying, well, Huey, if this stuff is all true, why do I still need to go to meetings? Well, I still go to meetings because I still need to be reminded of that. Still. Because life's not simple. Life's not easy. You know, my wife is off in Kazakhstan for 2 weeks at a family wedding and a reunion with her high school and college buddies, and just a bunch of responsibilities she has there. And life sucks here right now. I don't like being alone. I guess I've gotten pretty dependent on her in the last 16 plus years. But I'm certainly not going to go downtown and try to pretend to be 40 years younger than I am and get some action going in one of those bars. I mean, that would be, if I was off my nut, I would, all of a sudden look like Tom Cruise and be 35 years old.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And think I could get away with it. All right. Because I'd be drunk. And I'm not. I'm sitting here in my study trying to figure out what I need to do about the business that's in front of me today, right? Not drunk on my ass downtown. Years ago, very tragically, I used to travel overseas. It seemed like once a month, but it was very frequently. And I would find my place in these hotels in Europe all the time. And oftentimes, because of my schedule, they'd be airport hotels. And I was sitting in the airport hotel, I think it was Amsterdam or Copenhagen, I forget which town, someplace like that. And the phone rings. In those days, people called you on landlines. That's a long time ago. That has to be more than 20 years ago. The landline rings in this hotel room, and it's somebody from Washington telling me that so-and-so is lost in Paris. His wife can't find him. Can you get on the train and go try to help her locate him? Since they knew I was over there. And I said, you're out of your mind. I didn't say that. I was nicer than that, but that's what I was thinking. This person's out of their mind. We did it was that first anniversary of that particular person. I'm not the crying kind. I don't shed too many tears. I do very rarely, but I was bawling like a baby at this person's first anniversary because it was such a hard-fought victory, right? And to see him, a very high-level person, a very senior government official who had a very important post overseas for our government, to see him in that condition again was almost more than I could take, because he had forgotten about the importance of the word that we had tried to imbue in him in that first year, myself and a couple of friends of mine, was the centrality of this word abstinence. I could talk about a whole bunch of tragic stuff that I've seen, death and destruction. But the fact of the matter is that the practical reality of this purity of thought, once you grasp it, is profound. It will keep you sober. It has kept me sober. I went through a lot of issues, personal, business, otherwise, outside of the country and here. I did not have a totally unproblematic life in these years of sobriety. And I could have easily latched on to something, anything that would divert me from the idea that I had signed up to initially. So I'm giving, okay, this is hilarious. You know how they love to get up in churches and give testimony? Right. I'm testifying here to you, John. That is really sort of funny. I find that really amusing. And but I know it to be true because I've seen it on both the positive and the negative end for so long. And I don't care how many gods you pray to or how many wives you promise to, or how many children you have your regrets over and make your pledges to. If you don't internally grasp the nature of that word, when the shit hits the fan, you're fucked. Okay? And that I've seen happen over and over and over again. Right? And the people, like I know, I have some friends that have been sober over 40 years, and one way or another, they grasp that word and that concept every day. Right? The ones I know. And even the people I know with incredibly problematic stories who've stayed sober through them, through things that just, indescribable, abominable things that have happened to them, have embraced the nature and essence of that word. And there's something very pure and purifying about that, no matter how you get there, in one sense. But in the sense of the atheist, I think we boiled it down pretty well. Okay? Now, these conventional people in these conventional programs view all of this through the lens of an unseen force. There's an unseen force in the universe that is looking over their shoulder, right? And helping them do this. Now, as we discussed earlier, that can be efficacious for them. But for us, brothers and sisters, there's no unseen force lurking on our shoulder. The only force is the force that we generate within ourselves. And if we're able to generate that force and consistently apply that force over time, no matter what happens to us, even at the gates of hell or at the at the time of your death, it's going to apply. It's going to stay with you. But latching on to this outside stuff for us just doesn't work. I mean, it's wonderful that I can safely say that in my own case, it's wonderful to me that the one observable fact I have in this world of sobriety is this word abstinence. Everything stems from that observable fact, which takes us back to this whole idea of atheism and atheist thought having the word purity associated with it. We don't often have that word associated with us. But that is so central and so obvious and so real to me, right? It's as real to me as Jesus is to them. Realer, because what I'm talking about actually exists.
Right, and I think in this context that makes perfect sense. If something is very mystical and mysterious, then it's not clear at all.
No, it can
It's
be conditional.
confusing. Right.
It can be confusing. It can be, you can say, well, what happens to me if I lose my faith? That can be a great fear. Some people walk around with a great fear.
That's right.
Uh, and then lunatics and manic depressives like Bill Wilson can pick it up and turn it around on you. All right, and then you can be in some real shit because you're not doing it right.
Right.
I'm not telling anybody to do it right. I'm just saying it's something we must do. There's no right or wrong about it. It's pure. It's taking us to something that we very seldom see in life. How often do you encounter something that works 100% of the time?
Not often, no.
Does your marriage work 100% of the time? Does your job work 100% of the time? Does
No.
your government work for you
No.
100% of the time? Does the weather work for you 100% of the time? All right. Does your car work 100% of the time? No. Abstinence works 100% of the time if you do it. It's guaranteed. And there's not many guarantees in life. So I in some ways I hate to be beating almost sounds like I'm beating a horse, but if you get it, and you've got it. And once you've got it, you've got it. Okay? I mean, that's
Right. But you have also written articles about basically a process that you go through as well, so that
oh yeah.
that you recognize that abstinence is important,
All
that
right.
you make a commitment, you make a decision. There are
Right.
things that you do.
Well, of course. Because but without that word, you can't do
You
any of
can't do
those things.
anything. That's the most without
Okay,
that
everything that I it's
everything
perfectly
rests on that.
it's this is about this word and
Okay.
about atheism.
Gotcha.
But obviously I had to stop drinking. I had to go to meetings. I had to learn how to share. I had to learn how to be of assistance to someone else. I had to learn all those things, which reinforced to this day reinforces my commitment to that word. Right? Because when nobody's here and this apartment is empty and my wife is 10 time zones away, it's I'm totally a free agent on my own. I can do what I wish, but I have something within me that keeps me from doing myself that sort of harm. What what is so satisfying about this is that your commitment to that word, once you get there, and I'm not saying it's instant or easy or even feasible for everyone, all right? But once you get there, you're there, all right? And it's something that you can rely on for the rest of your life. It's one of the things that you can rely on absolutely for the rest of your life until the end of your life. And then you know that at least you've gotten through this life without conveying the misery around you that alcoholics and addicts convey. You're exempt from that. You're exempt from leaving that wreckage behind you simply because, and primarily because, you grasp this simple, pure concept. that we must remain abstinent in order to be sober.
Right.
Yeah, boy, oh boy, oh boy. So, where are we in the understanding of all of this? Where are we in the final analysis with all of this? Okay. We know that this action works 100% of the time. And we're postulating, and I'll once again, I'll read from my little crib sheet here. We postulate based on our personal limitations, not some fantastic truth that can't be proven. We're not postulating that there's some thing floating around in the air that we can't see or can't know or can't do. We're that somehow is influencing things. We're not doing that. All right. That we're postulating that there's an empirical solution that requires no supernatural belief system to support it.
Excuse me.
And that is in essence, is the purity of what we're talking about here, which leads to one of their favorite words, humility.
Mm.
Strangely enough, atheists can develop, even egotists like myself. Okay, I'll admit that. I think it's sort of obvious. Even egotists can discover a true appreciation of their limitations, which is a foundation for being humble enough to know that your impact on the world is, at least to some degree, somewhat limited. All right, which paradoxically, again, enough, reinforces this idea of abstinence, because that's one thing in life, at least, in all humility, realizing your limitations. If you grasp and hold and take that word abstinence and take it with you, it's something you absolutely can do that has observable and achievable results all of the time. I don't have my doctors and nurses. I spent a lot of time with doctors and nurses the last couple of months. And I know what their attitude is toward active alcoholics that they deal with in these situations. And it's not good. It's not a hospital. If you're an active alcoholic, it's not a good place to be, because you're not going to be that, they don't, very few of them have a lot of, because they view it as something that the mess before them is something you created,
Right.
I had none of that in my, I was like friends with all of them by the end. All right. I've been hugged on the way out the door, leaving a hospital. Okay. And not from any sense of obligation, but from a sense of, and if I was a drinking, even at the end, even when you're old, even when stuff is going wrong all around you, if you've remained abstinent, things will come to you that never would come to you any other way if you were a drunk or an addict. They wouldn't be looking at that distended belly of the person dying of cirrhosis with disdain. I once saw a friend of mine who died of alcoholism in a very good downtown DC hospital. And she was a younger person, and she had cirrhosis, and she had that giant distended belly from cirrhosis. This is when I was still drinking. And I still vividly remember the way those people in that hospital treated her. And it was appalling. It was not good. It was bad. So I don't want to dwell on, maybe I'm thinking about the end of all days because of my recent experiences, but this word and this idea and this set of principles can, well, not, I don't want to use the word principles, that gets too close to their bullshit. But, this reductive concept takes you all the way through.
Right.
It's great. I love it. I'm going to continue doing it.
Right.
I'm never going to give up on it. Now, why can't we? You asked the question earlier, and it really is one of the central questions in terms of what we do, is why can't we transfer this simple idea to everyone?
Right.
It would seem if it's so simple, it can be transferred to everyone.
Right.
Well, the mystery is, again, that it can't. And that's where the humility has to come in, where you as the individual do the best you can in your interaction with others. And you know that if only they would grasp the simplest of simple concepts, that many, if not all of their problems, but many of their problems would disappear and their lives would dramatically and drastically improve. But we can't do that. We can't go there. I wish we could. I haven't seen, I've seen people make incredible changes in their life and go from literally less than zero to something, right? But I've seen the opposite happen. People that had every advantage, every capability, any kind of positive aspect that you could possibly want to have in a life to make a great life, piss it all away. And I've seen it happen not once, not twice, but many times. And, I have to just humbly say, I'm going to do the best for myself. And possibly somewhere along the line, someone else will listen to or see something that makes sense to them, that works. And if this part of the abstinence, this part of the atheism series made sense to even one person and helped one person in their journey along the way here, then it's been a roaring success.
Oh, I'll tell you, the feedback that I get on these on these episodes that we have done have been overwhelmingly positive.
Well,
Can you give us a little preview what the next installment's going to be?
Well, it's going to be, I've got some notes here, and if I can find them, but I'm really sort of, I came out of the hospital, and I think I told you, when I came out of the hospital, it was like fuzz in my head.
Yeah.
It was just all the machines and all the drugs.
Yeah.
And,
you almost lost your life.
Yeah. Well,
this
I
was
had,
serious.
again, not too personal, but
Right.
I had septic shock, and 40% of the people that it used to be, in 2000, 60% of the people that got septic shock died just right.
I was going to say, my father died in 99, septic shock.
That was a 60% probability.
Yep.
Now they're doing so much better with ICU and other things. It's a 40% probability.
That's amazing.
And, a lot of people like me come out of it disabled. A lot of people like me come out with incipient, people my age in their 70s come out with incipient dementia. And, I had a walker for a week or two. The walker's been put away.
That's great.
It's folded up. It's not in use. And, so, I mean, but I still have this little brain fog.
Okay.
But the next podcast I was doing a little brain exercise when I got out of the hospital. I'm starting to fool around with the essay on this one. This one, the next one, in terms of our atheism, is called Sobriety, Intuition, and the Importance of the Individual.
I like it. Interesting.
Sobriety, intuition, and the importance of the individual. And I'm developing that slowly. Let's see how slow.
Okay. That sounds really interesting.
And you'll see when it's done, you'll see the essay first, and we'll have one of our usual pre-podcast chats
Hmm.
about it.
Okay.
But that it's something that is really it's interesting to me, and again, it may require some. I've got some of my books back here. It may require a little further reading and a lot more thought
Enjoyed
before I
these
get this thing
conversations
done.
immensely. Very interesting. I know that you put a lot of thought into them. We'll
Well,
post the essay with the episode, which will be posted this coming week.
well, hopefully, I've proven that I didn't come out of the hospital with incipient dementia.
No,
You know, that I still got that I'm hope. I don't know if I look like the same person. I just want to be the same person.
I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm wearing an American Atheist T-shirt here.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's
I,
wonderful.
I got
Reminding me.
that. I went down to Oklahoma City, years ago, and ran it and met Larry
Night.
Knight
He's
and
in New York
Mark
City on vacation.
from Texas.
Ah, okay.
He came over there. He came up there, and we had a great time.
That's a very interesting group of people. You must have had blast with them.
Yeah, it was funny. I I enjoyed the trip. I really enjoyed the trip.
I like Larry a lot. My wife and I went out to dinner with him and a friend of his in Toronto when we had the
Yeah,
convention
I
up
like
there.
Larry too. I haven't seen him for a long
yeah,
time.
yeah. Cooley liked him a lot too. I haven't seen him in a long time. I was hoping that we were going to have our face-to-face convention, but it was not to be.
No.
So I'm not involved in this virtual one. I don't know how that will come out. We'll see if anything comes out of that. But let's hope that something has come out of this, and that we've made some contribution to the continuum of atheists and recovery.
I think we have. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. I think we've come. We're even. You may be editing some stuff. We've come just over an hour, so I think we should probably wind it up.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, my friend.